Hello, this is Raziel Cohen with ndftraining.com, and today we're going to be talking about gun belts. Now, there are three categories of gun belts, and it all comes down to your purpose of use, the reason why you're going to be carrying a gun, and the kind of environment that you're going to be carrying a gun. Obviously, if you're going to be dressed up in a suit at a fancy event, you don't want to wear a gun belt that looks very clearly like a gun belt and will draw attention to yourself. Ideally, we want to try to keep as low of a profile as possible. Versus if you're at the range, then it doesn't really matter what it looks like. It's all about functionality. And ideally, we want to be able to get a good mix of area appropriateness and functionality out of the belt. So we're going to talk about three different types of gun belts today that will really make you be aware of the types that are available and make you help you get a decision of which one might be best for your purpose of use. The first belt we're going to talk about, these all, in my opinion, are probably excellent options. The question just comes down to which one would be right for you. But all of these belts are really, really nice, and they're all highly recommended just depending on your purpose of use. The first belt we're going to talk about is from a company called Blue Alpha Gear. Blue Alpha Gear makes, and they're known to make really, really nice belts, and they're all very high quality. The rigidness of the belts are not very, very, very high, but again, it comes down to your reason for why you need it. You might not need that sturdy of a gun belt, and there is definitely a line between having a functional gun belt and just having a piece of metal wrapped around your body. You do need to find a good median that'll still be comfortable throughout the day, than to have something that might be used more for competition where you might want that kind of rigidness. So this belt is a very good EDC belt. It's very basic. It's very straightforward. It has a Velcro that loops through a simple loop, and then it goes back around on itself. The reason why I really, really like this belt is that the rigidness, again, is not super, super strong where it's uncomfortable to wear. But of the most important things, and the reason why I like this belt, one of the most, is because there's almost no buckle. The reason why that's important is that if you're someone who carries appendix, you want to make sure that there's nothing that's going to be in the way of the way you're carrying. Now, anytime there's a buckle, there's going to be an issue with it sticking out and protruding more when you're trying to conceal carry, which makes it very obvious that you're wearing a gun. Since this has almost no buckle, it's very easy to be able to wear and conceal, and it doesn't have that much of an issue. The other belts we're going to speak about today could potentially have that problem, but of all these belts that we're going to show, this has the least of an issue simply because there's almost no buckle. So for that reason, this is one of my top concealed carry belts, because if you're trying to keep a low profile and you don't want to have a whole buckle that some people, they put on the side of their body, which is just not my preference, then this would absolutely be a great option. The next belt we're going to show you, this is from a company called Vetter. Now, when I first heard of Vetter, they were actually one of the first people that I bought a concealed carry holster from before. And they're a very nice company. They have very affordable prices. But they recently came out with this belt. Now, this belt is kind of like two steps up from the previous belt that I showed you for a few good reasons. First of all, it's much more rigid than the previous belt I just showed you. The buckle is a little bit larger, but it's also made out of like a CNC'd aluminum, which is really nice. And the reason why this belt is very unique is because the Velcro goes through that buckle and then loops back on itself. But then what you end up doing is you use that loop that you made and you use that as your like anchor point to be able to hold the holster in place. The reason why that's beneficial is because anytime that I was carrying the other belt, over time Velcro wears, and over time you're going to have to replace the belt. Since you're rarely going to be using the Velcro on this piece and you're just using that hook to be able to hold it in place, this is very clearly going to be able to last longer because you're not using that same retention point. So because of the strength and the stitching and the rigidness of this belt, as well as not needing to be using the Velcro on a day-to-day basis, this comes in probably as my number one for everyday carry. Now, the two downsides is that since the buckle is a little bit bigger, it's going to protrude a little bit more. It's almost not noteworthy to be able to mention, but it is something that you have to be careful about depending on your environment that you're going to be using a belt. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you have to be able to adjust this Velcro point to a very, very specific spot, because when you're carrying a gun, it's usually adding around an inch to your waistline. And if you're not carrying a gun for one day, or if you take off your gun for whatever reason and you're just like lounging around the house, there's going to be an extra inch of room that is going to make your pants either too loose or too wide. And that's usually something that I would prefer the other belt for, because you could just do a quick adjustment with the Velcro and like now you're like secure again. So what you have to do for this belt is you have to find a very, very like sweet median between the two of carrying and not carrying a gun for it to be comfortable. So for that reason, it's not necessarily ideal, but it's still, for me, my personal favorite everyday carry belt as of now. So those two belts were more for everyday carry use and general day-to-day stuff. The next category we're going to talking about is dress-up belts, things that you want to go to an event and look a little bit more classy and still be able to carry a gun, but and make it fit with the environment that you're in. The only company, in my opinion, that has done a really great job of doing that is Core Essentials. Core Essentials makes a lot of really, really nice belts that they feel very high quality. They're made very, very well. Their stitching is really nice. It looks like a really nice quality leather. They have a lot of different buckle options that you could choose from that you're able to swap out. So you could technically get one belt and then get different buckles to switch out depending on what you want to do. And they have something called their trackline system, where instead of it being holes like a regular traditional belt, this is something that just clicks in, and you could really, really fine tune exactly where you want your belt tightness to be. And again, with a gun, that's a very big deal because you want to be able to be as comfortable as possible. So you can hear the clicking, and you could choose between each individual click where you want the belt to stop. The good part also is that if you want to loosen the belt, if you just ate and you want to just have a little bit more loose, a loose sitting belt when you sit down, there is a tab that you could press and it just opens up and is able to be done very quietly. So I'm able to keep that tab down and open and close it, and people don't know that you're adjusting a belt, and it's very quick and very comfortable. There was other belts that I looked at from Core Essentials that for me, even for an everyday carry belt, they were too rigid. This is for me excellent, especially for a dress-up belt. It's very, very nice, and it's not as rigid as the other ones that they had available. The issue with the other ones is that if you have an everyday carry belt and you're moving around and doing things, if you like squat down to go fix something, since the belt is so rigid, it literally just protrudes out the back of your pants because it's just keeping that same loop, which is nice if it was a competition belt. For an everyday carry belt, that wasn't ideal for me. This, however, for their dress line, like their dress-up belts, is very, very great, and they're probably the only company that I use when it comes to dress belts and being able to carry a gun. The last category is a tactical belt, something that you'd use at the range, something you'd use if you're a law enforcement officer, something that you'd use if you're in competition. It's a much more specifically designed and set up system that you're going to use depending on the kind of job that you have. But you can tell clearly and very quickly that this is not a standard kind of belt. This is something that is very purpose built and specific to a specific job. So this is the belt that I use. It's from Wilder Tactical. They have a minimalist belt pad in the middle, and they have a inner belt. The inner belt that I'm actually using is not from Wilder Tactical. I believe it's from Blue Alpha Gear as well. I just really like their belts. It's a very simple clip. It's not anything fancy, but it works really well for what my system is here. I'm going to probably do another video dedicated to just the way I set up this belt. But this is a good option for you to be able to be aware of, that this is much more for duty use or competition use, depending on the kind of accessories you add to this kind of system. And this is a very great option if you want to just kind of throw it on and throw it off. So there are two types of belts that are in this form. One of them has an inner belt and an outer belt, which means that the inner belt is something you'd put through your loops, and the outer belt will attach to that and then hook in the center. That makes for a very rigid, very strong system. The reason why I went with a minimalist belt pad as opposed to a double belt and inner and outer belt system is because I wanted a gun belt that if I needed to, I could just throw it on no matter what I'm wearing and be able to utilize all the things that are on it. So for a home defense option, if you have your gun set up, if you have your magazine set up, you have medical on the back, you have all the different accessories that you need, no matter what you're wearing or not wearing, you could literally attach the gun belt to you and then walk out with everything already set up and ready for you. If you have to use an inner and outer belt system, then you're going to have to attach the inner belt and then the outer belt on top of it, or it just might not fit as snug as something like this. This minimalist belt pad has kind of like a rubbery interior, and because of that, it really sticks to almost anything that you press it up against. So for me, this has always been my system that I prefer to be able to just throw on, attach it, undo it if I don't need it anymore, which is also great that if you need to take off someone's gear if they got into an accident or if they had an issue for whatever reason, and it would be easier to deal with the person without the belt on. It takes 2 clips for this thing to completely come off, as opposed to an inner and outer belt where you're gonna have to be like tearing it off and having like a real struggle with it. So this has been just an overview of the different belt categories that there are available on the market. It's definitely something you want to look into and make sure that you're ordering the proper ones and making sure that you dress appropriately based on the situation that you're going to be involved in. It's very important to make sure that you're always dressing around the environment that you're in so you don't stick out, especially if you're a concealed carry holder and you're trying to keep a low profile. Very often, if you get into a situation where they realize that you're the person with a gun, then you're going to be the first person targeted because they know that you're going to be the first resistance that they're going to have. So make sure to dress appropriately, make sure to use the right belt. You always want to make sure that the belt you're using is appropriate, because a bad belt that's very like a soft material or soft leather could be a huge issue when it comes to drawing your gun. And in a dangerous situation, you want to make sure that the system you have on is going to be effective and it's going to be able to be used appropriately for a dangerous encounter and be used properly. So if you had any questions on this, you can feel free to leave a comment below. You can reach out to us if you have a question. If you're maybe not sure what kind of belt you want to be able to get, reach out to us. We'd love to be able to help you out. I will try to answer any questions that you have. This is Raziel Cohen with ndftraining.com. Thank you for watching.